My name is Adam. I'm 34, and I've always been the quiet one in my family. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I learned early on that in my family, silence was the only way to keep the peace. My wife Claire used to say I was like a dam holding back a flood. I'd just smile and tell her she was the best thing that ever happened to me. She still is. Claire and I have been married for 7 years now, and we've been trying to have a child for nearly 5 of those years. Countless doctor visits, endless tests, moments of hope crushed by late-night tears and quiet maybe next times. She's stronger than anyone I've ever met. But no matter how strong she is, some words still cut too deep. Now let me give you some context. I come from one of those families that pretends to be close-knit, but in reality, it's more like a web of quiet rivalries, half-baked loyalties, and years of unresolved tension. Christmases have always been a performance. Everyone pretending we're this happy, wholesome family, when really everyone's keeping score. My sister Rachel, the eldest at 38, has always been the golden child. Smart, successful, and with the kind of confidence that could either inspire or flatten you. She married young, had a son Jonah when she was just 20, and raised him mostly on her own after her husband bailed. Or so we all thought. Rachel has this way of making every family event revolve around her. You know, the type constantly pointing out how busy she is, how hard it is being a single mom, how no one ever really understands her struggle. And for years, everyone just nodded along, careful not to poke the bear. But this past Christmas, something changed. We hosted Christmas dinner at my parents' house, like we do every year. My dad, a quiet, stern man who speaks maybe 10 words per meal, had even dusted off his old record player to play some jazz in the background. Mom fluttered about like she always did, making sure the table was set just so, nervously adjusting. Napkins like peace depended on it. Claire and I showed up with a homemade pecan pie and a bottle of wine, trying to keep spirits high despite how emotionally drained Claire had been lately. We had just gotten word that our 3rd round of IVF had failed. Now, she hadn't cried in front of anyone, not even me. She just smiled politely, her hands folded tightly in her lap when we told the family. Rachel showed up late, of course, with Jonah and her newest boyfriend in tow. The guy looked barely old enough to drive, but Rachel introduced him like he was her great love. She swept into the room like a gust of drama, complaining about traffic and how hard it was to get Jonah to put his phone down for once. No one said anything. No one ever does. That's just Rachel. Dinner started out quietly enough. Roast turkey, mashed potatoes, awkward chatter. Rachel launched into a story about her promotion again and how her department would fall apart without her. Claire listened politely, nodding along, even though she clearly wasn't up for it. I kept glancing at her, hoping she'd squeeze my hand under the table like she usually did. Her little signal that she was okay. But she just sat there smiling. That too perfect smile that told me she wasn't. Then in the middle of passing the gravy, Rachel looked directly at us and said, "You know, it's funny. You two talk about starting a family like it's some big journey, but you wouldn't really understand what it means. Not until you've had to actually raise a child. It's not until you've stayed up all night with a sick kid or scraped together lunch. Money." The room went quiet, not silent, not yet. But that uncomfortable sort of hush where even the forks hitting plates seemed too loud. Claire's hand froze mid-reach for the cranberry sauce. I stared at Rachel, trying to process if I'd heard her right. She kept eating like she hadn't just dropped a grenade in the middle of dinner. Claire blinked, looked down, then back up with a tight smile. "I guess we'll just have to keep trying," she said, her voice light but shaking. "We're still hopeful." Rachel snorted. Actually snorted and said, "Hope's great and all, but some things just aren't meant to be. Maybe it's the universe telling you something." That's when I felt the blood rush to my ears. My chair creaked as I sat back, biting down hard on the inside of my cheek. No one said anything. Not Mom, not Jonah, not even Rachel's flavor of a month. Boyfriend, who just looked like he wanted to disappear into his glass of wine. Then Rachel leaned in a little and added, "I mean, maybe you two should just get a dog or something. Not everyone's cut out for real family." That's when I saw Claire's face fall, just for a second. just enough for me to see her heartbreak flash. Through, I opened my mouth, ready to say something, anything. But before I could, a loud clang broke the silence. My father, the quietest man in any room, had slammed his fork down hard enough to make Jonah flinch. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back, and looked Rachel dead in the eyes. Then why don't you tell them who really raised your son? The room froze. Rachel's face drained of color. Claire turned to look at me, wide-eyed. Mom opened her mouth like she was about to stop him, but didn't say a word. Rachel didn't speak. Not a sound, just sat there, eyes darting between Dad and Jonah, who looked confused and suddenly very alert, and that ... That's where everything began to unravel. The silence that followed my dad's outburst was heavy, like the air itself had. Thickened. Nobody moved, not even the record player, which had finished its side and was now clicking rhythmically in the background, like some strange countdown. Fracture at first, but enough. She recovered quickly, or tried to. I don't know what you're talking about, Dad, she said, her voice flat, barely concealing the tremble underneath. You sound ridiculous. Jonah looked from her to my father, confused. Wait, what does he mean? Raise me how? My dad didn't answer. He just shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked into the kitchen, leaving the rest of us sitting in that mess of confusion and tension. Claire glanced at me, still processing, still trying to stay composed. I could see it, the storm rising just behind her eyes. I reached for her hand under the table, and this time she let me take it. But Rachel wasn't done. She never is. After a few forced laughs and sips of wine, she snapped back into her usual self, the cold edge in her voice returning with full force. Honestly, I don't know what's gotten into him. He's been off lately. This must be age catching up with him. Or maybe someone's been feeding him nonsense. She said that last part with her eyes locked on me, like this whole thing was somehow my fault. That was her way. Always redirect. Always spin the story so she's the victim and someone else is the aggressor. It had worked for decades. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. But Claire, gentle as she is, wasn't going to let it slide this time. You know, Rachel, she said, voice still soft. Maybe this isn't the time for jabs. We're all here to celebrate, right? Maybe we can just enjoy dinner and leave the judgment for another day. Rachel scoffed, swirling her wine like she was in some bad soap opera. It's always another day with you two. Always waiting. Always fragile. You don't know what real pressure... It looks like my jaw tightened. Claire's hand slipped out of mine. Jonah, still clearly rattled, asked, "What did Grandpa mean, though, about raising me?" Rachel shot him a look sharp enough to slice marble. He didn't mean anything. He's old. Sometimes he remembers things wrong. He doesn't seem like he's remembering anything wrong, Claire murmured, just loud enough to be heard. She didn't even look at Rachel, just stared down at her napkin, folding it slowly, as if that would keep her grounded. I knew she was holding back. Claire had always been patient, but being talked down to, especially after everything we'd been through with the IVF, she was cracking too. Would have been one thing if that was the end of it, but Rachel wasn't satisfied with humiliating us. Once. No. Over dessert, as the tension started to thin just slightly, she turned to Mom and dropped another bomb like it was nothing. By the way, I'm thinking of redoing the guest room, turning it into an office, meditation space. Jonah doesn't need it anymore. And I think it's time I had a space that's just mine. You know, a room that actually serves a purpose. Mom blinked, mid-slice of fruitcake. I thought Jonah was still using that room to visit. He hasn't stayed over in months, Rachel said, waving a dismissive hand. Besides, I doubt he's coming back to that dusty little space now that he's got his friends and sports and girlfriends. Jonah flushed but said nothing. I glanced at Claire. Her expression was unreadable. Then Rachel looked directly at us again. But hey, if you two are really set on the whole parenting thing, maybe I'll let you borrow the crib and the changing table from the attic. Might as well put them to good use. Claire stood up quietly, slowly, deliberately. She excused herself and walked toward the bathroom, but I knew better. She didn't need to go to the bathroom. She needed to breathe. I waited 5 seconds, then followed her out of the dining room and down the hall. Found her standing by the back door, not crying, just silent. Her hand on her chest, eyes locked on nothing. "I can't do this again," she whispered when I approached. "You won't have to," I said, and I meant it. Back in the dining room, Rachel was laughing with her boyfriend as if nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just gutted the woman I love with a backhanded offer of charity. My mother pretended not to notice, cutting small pieces of dessert and offering them to everyone like sugar could fix it. Jonah looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. He was used to this dynamic. We all were. That night, when we got home, Claire finally cried. Not loud, not messy, just tears she couldn't hold in anymore. I held her for what felt like hours, my own anger boiling beneath the surface, thick and unresolved. And then, the next day, the phone call started. First from Mom, asking if Claire was feeling okay, pretending not to know why she had left the table early. Then from Rachel, saying she wanted to clear the air, but making it clear she believed Claire had overreacted and that infertility is a sensitive topic. Sure, but no one meant any harm, as if harm only counted when it was deliberate. She even had the audacity to say, "Honestly, Adam, I thought Claire would be tougher than this. You guys act like you're made of glass." That was when something shifted in me. The damn Claire always talked about cracked. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just told her one thing. "You should really be more careful around Dad. He remembers everything, even the things you wish he'd forget." And I hung up. She didn't call back, but I could feel it. She was shaken. And for the first time in years, that gave me some peace. I didn't know then just how deep Dad's words would cut or how many secrets were about to rise to the surface. But something told me. Rachel's perfect little world was about to split wide open. The strange thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always come with flashing lights and alarms. Sometimes it slips in like a draft through a cracked window, quiet, subtle, barely noticeable, until everything is freezing.
Oh.
That was how the next few weeks felt. The fallout from Christmas left our family on edge, but no one addressed it directly. Claire and I withdrew. We declined invitations, skipped family group chats, didn't respond to Mom's half-hearted attempts at smoothing things over. We needed space. But silence in our family is never just silence. It's an invitation for someone to fill the void with their own version of events. And Rachel wasted no time doing just that. Started with the whispers. Claire's cousin texted her out of the blue one evening asking if we were okay, that Rachel had mentioned we were going through a rough patch. Then a few days later, an old friend of mine called saying he'd heard from Rachel at the gym. We ran into each other, and she'd been worried we were pushing ourselves too hard to be parents and might need a break. The way she said it, according to him, sounded like she was painting. Claire is emotionally unstable and me as some desperate man dragging my poor wife through an endless fertility roller coaster. It was calculated. Rachel wasn't just taking jabs. Anymore, she was planting seeds, controlling the narrative, turning our pain into dinner party gossip. Claire didn't even know half of it. I shielded her from most of it, but I couldn't stop what came next. 2 weeks after Christmas, I got a call from my parents asking if I could stop by for a quick chat. That phrase alone set off alarm bells. I arrived on a Sunday afternoon, Claire still curled up in bed, tired from another round of specialist consultations. When I walked into the living room, Mom was sitting with her hands folded in her lap like she was in a courtroom, and Dad was. Leaning against the fireplace, arms crossed. Rachel was already there. She didn't even look at me when I walked in, just stared at her phone, legs crossed, acting like this was some boring errand she had to get through before yoga class. "What's going on?" I asked, already feeling the tension in my shoulders. My mom cleared her throat. "We've been talking with Rachel, and she brought something to our attention about Claire." I blinked. "Claire." Dad didn't say anything. His eyes were on Rachel. Rachel finally looked up and said, "I wasn't going to bring it up, but I think you deserve to know what kind of woman you're married to, especially if you're building a future together." My fists clenched. "You have no right." She was at the clinic, Adam, a few days ago. Jonah's girlfriend saw her. I narrowed my eyes. "We've been going to clinics. We've been trying for a child, remember?" Rachel smirked. "Not that kind of clinic." She was at the mental health center, the one downtown. She was crying, talking to a therapist. The room went silent. I felt the floor shift beneath me. Not because I was ashamed. I wasn't. Claire had every right to seek help. After everything she'd been through, after the years of trying, the hormones, the miscarriages, the quiet heartbreaks, the loneliness, she deserved 1,000 therapists. But Rachel wasn't sharing this out of concern. She was using it like a weapon. My mother looked torn, but worried. "Sweetheart, is Claire all right? Should we be worried?" That was when it hit me. They weren't. Just gossiping. Rachel had painted Claire as unstable, as someone fragile, as someone unfit to be a mother. That realization landed in my gut like a brick. "She's in therapy because she's strong enough to ask for help," I said, my voice low. Stronger than anyone in this room. Rachel rolled her eyes. "Oh, come on, Adam. You can't build a family on broken foundations. Maybe it's time you considered that your situation isn't just unlucky. Maybe it's a sign." I stepped forward without realizing I'd moved. "You don't get to talk about signs, Rachel? Not when you've been lying about yours for the last 17 years. Her smile faltered. Dad shifted slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said carefully. I turned to my father. "You said it at Christmas about Jonah. What did you mean?" Dad looked away. Rachel laughed nervously. "This is ridiculous." But Dad finally spoke. "You want the truth, Adam?" he said, voice low. "Fine. Jonah's not her son." Rachel stood up so fast her chair scraped the hardwood. "Don't you dare." Dad didn't flinch. "He's your sister's boy, but he's not yours, Rachel. He's Mom's." I blinked. "What?" "Rachel got pregnant young. Too young. She was barely 17. We weren't ready to let her drop out of school, ruin her chances. So your mother and I, we adopted him, quietly told everyone he was hers. Registered the birth certificate under our name." My knees nearly buckled. "You raised your grandson as your son?" Dad nodded. Rachel moved back in after her first semester of college. "We did what we had to do." I turned back to Rachel. Her face was pale, her hands clenched at her sides. "So all this time, all the bragging, all the judgment, all the lectures about real motherhood, you were hiding the fact that Mom did the real work?" "Shut up," she snapped. "You don't get it?" "No, I don't," I said. "You judge Claire for not being a mother when you gave yours away." Rachel took a step forward. "I did what I had to. I was a child, and so is Claire." I snapped. "Every time she gets bad news, every time she walks out of a hospital with empty arms, she feels like she failed. But she keeps going. She keeps showing up. She wants to be a mother. She doesn't lie about it. She doesn't run from it." Rachel's voice cracked. "Oh, you think I wanted it this way? You think it was easy watching my son call me Rachel while he calls her Mom? But you let it happen. You let everyone believe this version of your life while trashing ours. You made Claire feel small for what? To protect your lie?" My mom was crying now. Quietly, Dad said nothing. Rachel just stood there, lips pressed together, breathing heavily. And then, as if to twist the knife a little deeper, she said the one thing I didn't think she had the gall to say. Well, maybe it was better that way. "After all, I turned out successful. Claire's just your little pet project. She clings to you because she has no identity without you." Something inside me broke. And in that moment, I made a decision. Not out of anger, out of clarity. I wasn't going to let this woman, my sister, rewrite our lives anymore. I was going to burn her lies down with the one thing she couldn't manipulate. The truth. But I wasn't the one who would deliver it. Someone else was, and she had every reason to speak up now, because Jonah had just walked through the front door, and he'd heard everything. The door creaked as Jonah stepped inside, holding a pair of headphones in one hand and a confused, almost dazed look on his face. His backpack hung loose off one shoulder like he'd forgotten he was even wearing it. Nobody said a word. My mom's hand flew to her mouth. Rachel froze. "Wait, what?" Jonah asked, eyes flicking between the four of us.
"Ow! What do you mean? I'm not."
"Rachel's son?" Rachel stepped forward fast, her voice too high. "Jonah, baby, don't listen to this. It's just your uncle is confused, doesn't know what he's saying." But Jonah didn't look at her. He looked at my dad. Is it true? Dad didn't flinch. Yes. Jonah's face changed in a way that made my chest tighten, like the ground beneath him had vanished, and he didn't know whether to scream or run. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He backed up slightly, gripping the doorknob like he needed to hold on to something real. So, Grandma's my mom? You all lied to me my whole life? Rachel reached for him, but he stepped back. Please, I did it to protect you. No, he said, voice shaking. You did it to protect yourself. He turned and left, the door slamming shut behind him. Rachel rushed to follow, but I stepped in front of her. Give him space. You don't get to tell me what to do. It's mine. She stopped herself. I stared her down. Finished the sentence, but she didn't. She just stood there, breathing heavily, rage and panic fighting for space in her eyes. The house went quiet, uncomfortably quiet. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. I just walked out the door and drove home in silence. Claire was in bed when I returned, reading a book she barely touched. She looked up when she heard the door, her face softening. How'd it go? I didn't have the words, so I just walked over and sat beside her on the edge of the bed. She reached for my hand like she always did, and I leaned into it. I'm sorry, I finally whispered. She furrowed her brow. For what? For not protecting you sooner? For letting her talk to you like that? For not burning it all down when I should have? Claire sat up. Adam, you did the best you could. No, I said. I did what I was taught. To do, keep the peace. Swallow it. But peace with people like Rachel, it's just surrender with a prettier name. Claire watched me quietly. Did something happen? I told her everything about the betrayal, the lie about Jonah, what Rachel had done behind our backs, how she weaponized Claire's therapy, tried to make her look unfit. I spared no detail for once. I didn't protect anyone's feelings. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just listened, her face unreadable until I finished. Then she said, so, what do we do now? And that was the question, wasn't it?
For the
first time in years, I didn't feel like trying to fix it. I didn't want to attend another family dinner or smooth over another lie or pretend. Rachel was anything but a walking wound. We kept dressing up as a sister. I stared at Claire and said, we walk away. She tilted her head. For good? I nodded. Let them sit with what they built. Let them realize what they lost. That was the start of it. Quiet, clean, no fireworks. We stopped responding to group texts. We ignored Rachel's calls. My parents sent a long, guilt-soaked email asking us to come to the table, talk things out. As a family, but we said nothing. Days turned into a week, then 2. I started waking up earlier, working out again, cooking more. I'd hold Claire longer before we fell asleep. Sometimes she'd wake up in the middle of the night and reach for me just to check I was still there. I always was. But something inside me had changed. I started gathering things. Not revenge, exactly. Not in the traditional sense. I wasn't plotting. Ways to humiliate Rachel or expose her to strangers. I wasn't angry anymore. No, I was focused because while Rachel played her games in the open, I started looking into the things she wanted to keep buried. Old school records, medical bills, legal documents I remembered glimpses of as a kid but never paid attention to. A conversation with an old neighbor who remembered the weeks Rachel suddenly disappeared when she was 17. Piece by piece. I built a timeline, not because I wanted to ruin her, but because, when the time came, I wanted the truth to be undeniable. I wanted Jonah to know exactly what had happened. Not for drama, for clarity. More than anything, I wanted to finally close. The door, not slam it in anger, but lock it with purpose. Rachel had taken too much space in our lives. She had judged Claire's quiet pain with loud cruelty. She had used motherhood as a crown while hiding the very truth of how she got there. Worst of all, she had tried to poison the people I loved. With whispers and lies.
Oh.
But now it was my turn to tell the story. Not for her, for Jonah. And I knew exactly when I'd do it because his birthday was coming up. And this year, he wanted answers. Jonah didn't come home for a few days after that Sunday explosion. Not to Rachel's, not to my parents'. He turned 18 just a few weeks later, but in those in-between days, he stayed with a friend's family and didn't answer anyone's calls except mine. He texted me 2 days after he overheard everything. Can we talk? Just us. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Claire didn't come. I think she understood Jonah needed a space that didn't feel clouded with Rachel's judgment or his grandmother's. Silence. He showed up wearing a hoodie and ball cap, trying not to be noticed, and slid into the booth across from me with a quiet hey. Hey, I said back, trying to keep my voice calm. I didn't ask how he was. I knew how he was, and I respected him enough not to make him explain it. For the first 5 minutes, he didn't touch his drink. He just stared out the window.
Oh.
Then he finally asked, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" There wasn't a perfect answer. I told him the truth, or at least what I had pieced together over time. That my parents had made a decision long ago to protect Rachel's future, that Rachel had gone along with it. That I hadn't even known the full story myself until that night. He listened, arms crossed tightly across his chest, his jaw clenching every few seconds. He looked like Rachel when he was angry, that same look of calculation, but his anger was quieter, more purposeful, different. Then out of nowhere he said, "She told me you guys were broken, you and Claire, that you couldn't handle real life." My mouth went dry. Jonah blinked a few times. "She said you were obsessed with being a parent, but that it would break you, that you'd never make it through the hard parts." Said Claire was already halfway to a breakdown. I stared at him. He met my eyes. "I didn't believe her," he added, voice softer now. "I just didn't know what to believe anymore." That's when I handed him the folder. It wasn't dramatic, no secret, dossier or blackmail files. Just the truth, organized and neat. The legal papers showing his original birth certificate and the corrected one. The hospital record I had quietly requested under the Freedom of Information law, listing Rachel as the biological mother. The school letter my parents wrote excusing her absence when she'd quietly been sent to a private maternity center. Even a grainy photo of Rachel holding him as a baby before Mom took over. Jonah stared at it for a long time. Flipped through slowly, didn't speak for nearly 10 minutes. Then he said she had me and just gave me away. And still, she made fun of Claire for wanting what she gave up. That was the moment I realized he wasn't just angry, he was grieving. Not just the lie, the years, the trust, the idea of his mother. "I want to live with Grandma," he said suddenly, "at least until I figure things out." I didn't know if that would last, but I didn't question it. "Whatever you need," I told him. He nodded, stood up, and gave me something I never expected. Hug. It was short, awkward, but real. In the weeks that followed, life shifted. Not all at once, not magically, but steadily. Claire started smiling again. Not for show. Not the brave smile she used to wear like armor, but real smiles. She picked up a part-time role as a support group coordinator for women dealing with fertility. LOSA didn't pay much, but every time she came home, she was glowing with purpose. As for me, I started getting offers at work I hadn't expected. A promotion I never chased. 2 colleagues inviting me to partner on a startup idea I'd once tossed out at a conference. People suddenly saw something in me they hadn't before. It wasn't that I'd changed overnight. It was that for the first time in my life, I wasn't dragging. Dead weight behind me. Cutting ties with Rachel had cleared space, mental space, emotional space. Even my parents, still cautious, began walking differently around us. Like they sensed we weren't waiting for their approval anymore. Jonah moved in with Mom, quietly, without drama. Rachel tried to protest, of course, but he was 18 now, legally. Free to do what he wanted. She blew up the family chat, sent long, guilt-drenched messages, tried to spin it as parental alienation. No one responded, not even Mom. And that silence, that collective refusal to play her game, was louder than any argument we could have made. Then one morning, I opened my inbox to find an email from Jonah, a draft of a college application essay. Subject line, "Can you read this before I send it in?" The title, "The Family You Choose." The essay told the story of a boy raised in a lie and how he found truth, not in genetics, but in honesty, in resilience, in 2 people who had every reason to give up, but kept showing up anyway. At the end, he wrote, "If I ever become a father, I'll know the kind of love I want to give, because I saw it in the people who wanted me even when they had nothing to gain. I read that line 5 times, then I read it again, aloud to Claire. Cried. I did too. We hadn't gotten the baby we dreamed of, but we had something just as real. And maybe, just maybe, we weren't done building our family yet, because the universe, despite everything, still had one card left to play. And Rachel, well, her spotlight was about to burn out because her biggest lie was about to go public. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to receive. I was sitting in my office, sipping my 3rd coffee of the day, trying to review a proposal for our new client, a boutique tech firm launching a medical record system, when my work phone rang. Unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something told me to pick up. Hello? There was a pause, then a woman's voice clipped, professional but uncertain. Is this Adam Grant? Yes, I said, a little guarded. This is Melanie. I'm calling from Hutton and West Family Law. We were referred to you by Rachel Montgomery regarding your firm's financial advisory services. She said you'd be familiar with her trust. I froze. Rachel had never, not once, mentioned a trust. Woman continued, unaware of the landmine she'd just dropped. She said you've handled family finances before and might be the best person to assess a property value as part of her new filing. What filing? I asked casually, though my pulse had picked up. Custody adjustment, she said. She's moving to amend legal status now that her son is of age. The language used implies she wants to assert full biological rights. There's some complexity with the original adoption. Apparently, we just needed background records on the house and any supporting financials. I didn't speak for a few seconds. Then I said, I think there's been a misunderstanding. She apologized quickly and hung up, clearly embarrassed. But I sat there in silence, staring at my monitor, the dots connecting faster than I could keep up with them. Rachel was preparing legal documents not to gain Jonah back. That ship had sailed, but to rewrite history she could dissolve. The paper trail that showed my parents adopted Jonah, she could potentially realign legal rights in her favor. For what purpose? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew Rachel. It wasn't about Jonah. It was about control, image, legacy. She couldn't stand the idea that the story, her story, was no longer hers to tell. I didn't know how far she was willing to go until I got another piece of the puzzle. A few days later, Mom called me. Her voice was tight, almost trembling. She's asking me to sign over the house, she said, barely above a whisper. Said it was part of the estate reorganization, that it would help the family. But Adam, she's never cared about the house. Did you sign anything? No, she said quickly. I told her I'd think about it, but she's pushing hard. I hung up and immediately began digging. See, I work in high-level business compliance, and part of my job includes analyzing financial fraud, asset manipulation, and contract irregularities. I'd kept that line of work far away from family drama until now. I called in a favor from a colleague who owed me a few hours of their time and asked them to help review public filings under Rachel's name. It took 2 days, but what we found made my stomach twist. Rachel had leveraged a small family trust. Started decades ago in my grandfather's name to obtain a silent partner loan on a fixer-upper property in a nearby suburb. But what stood out was that she used Jonah's name on several documents, his college fund to be exact, claiming she was his sole guardian and biological mother, using language that blurred the lines between current status and her original motherhood. The documents weren't just shady, they were legally vulnerable. If Jonah didn't consent to her using his name, she could be in serious trouble. That was when I called Jonah and laid it all out for him. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, She told me she'd set money aside for me, but I never saw it. I felt the tension in my shoulders return. That fund's probably been dry for years. Let out a long breath. What can I do? I can start by freezing her access, I said. You're 18. You have rights now. If she used your name without your consent, we can make that count. Didn't hesitate. The next morning, Jonah and I met at the bank. I helped him file the necessary paperwork to block access to the account and initiate an audit. When the bank officer saw the conflicting paperwork, especially the guardian claims made after his 18th birthday, her eyebrows shot up. This could trigger a fraud review, she said quietly. Depending on what we find, she might not just lose access, She might face criminal liability. Jonah didn't blink. Do it. That was when I realized something important. Rachel had spent years weaponizing other people's stories. Claire's pain, my parents' sacrifices, Jonah's identity. But she'd never bothered to build her own truth. Just image, just surface. Now that image was starting to crack, and we had. Something she didn't. Documentation proof, the truth in paper form. I began collecting everything. Receipts, photos, emails. Compiled a full file of Rachel's contradictions. The dates she told people she was Jonah's sister versus mother. Way she used his name for financial leverage while denying him basic rights. Even social media posts that contradicted the legal paperwork she'd filed. And while I did this, something strange began happening. People started coming to me. Aunt who said Rachel borrowed money she never paid back. Got an old family friend who admitted Rachel used Jonah as an excuse to get out of a lease. A former coworker who claimed Rachel listed Jonah as a dependent. On her taxes, even when he hadn't lived with her for over a year, it was a mess. A tangled web of lies finally unraveling. But I didn't plan to go public. Not yet. No. Rachel needed a stage, a spotlight. And that opportunity was already on the calendar. Jonah's graduation. In front of the whole family and every friend, mentor, and neighbor who ever believed Rachel's perfect story, that's when the truth would come out. This time, she wouldn't be able to twist it. She would be standing in a room full of people who once admired her and realized too late that the only thing left in her hands was the threadbare mask she'd been wearing for years. And I would be watching not out of spite, but because sometimes the best revenge is simply letting the truth speak louder than the lies. The high school auditorium buzzed with excitement. The kind that hums just beneath the surface on milestone days. Parents clutching bouquets, friends waving homemade signs, teachers wearing the kind of tired pride only educators know. Claire and I arrived early, slipping into a center row seat behind a few parents we recognized from Jonah's soccer days. She wore a soft navy dress and held a small box wrapped in tissue paper on her lap. A graduation gift for Jonah. A new watch. The kind meant to say, "You're a man now, but you'll always be family." Rachel had a front row seat reserved, of course. She arrived late, as expected, in a cream-colored designer dress and heels too tall for the polished gym floor. She made a point of kissing the assistant principal's cheek and loudly announcing, "My son is graduating today." To anyone within earshot, people smiled politely. Some clapped, but I noticed something else too. A few people turned and looked at me. Not her. Me. It had already begun. I'd mailed the envelope out the week before. Wasn't flashy. Just a single thick packet of documents addressed to Jonah's school counselor, the principal, and the school board liaison. Inside, every legal contradiction Rachel had created. Her conflicting identities as sister and mother, her misrepresentation of guardianship, her use of Jonah's name on private property filings and fraudulent trust activity, along with a signed affidavit from Jonah himself. Not an attack, just facts, all tied to a simple request. Update school records to reflect Jonah's legal mother, not Rachel. Remove her name from documents moving forward. Notify her of the correction as required by law. It was clinical, but it was a detonation because Rachel's entire identity every PTA meeting. Every Instagram post, every holiday brag was built on that lie that she was Jonah's sole protector, his guiding light. Now, she wasn't even listed as an emergency contact. The ceremony began. The usual speeches, light, warm, cliché, but I wasn't listening. I watched Rachel 2 rows ahead, shifting in her seat every few minutes, checking her phone, brows furrowed. She'd received the notification email that morning. Her face betrayed nothing specific, but her body language was loud. She leaned over to whisper to someone beside her. They nodded awkwardly. Her boyfriend, maybe. Or just another unwilling prop. When Jonah's name was called, we all stood to clap. He walked with purpose, calm, a quiet sort of pride radiating off. He didn't look at Rachel. He looked at us. Claire clapped hard, her eyes shining. I just smiled, steady as he crossed the stage, shook hands with the principal, and accepted his diploma from the counselor. The same counselor who had forwarded me a copy of the school's updated records the night before. Name of legal guardian: Evelyn Grant, grandmother. Emergency contacts: Adam Grant and Claire Grant. Rachel Montgomery. No authorization on file. And it wasn't just symbolic, because behind the scenes, Jonah had taken a step further. He'd submitted a formal complaint with the Financial Oversight Committee, flagging Rachel's unauthorized use of his name in the property filing. The bank had frozen the loan. The trust was under review. The silent partner she'd looped into, Deal, a man I'd quietly spoken to through a mutual contact, had already backed out. She wasn't just being erased from Jonah's future. Her house of cards was caving in. After the ceremony, people flooded the lobby for photos and hugs and congratulations. Claire and I waited outside, giving Jonah space. We didn't want to crowd him. He emerged a few minutes later, diploma in hand, and walked straight toward us. No hesitation. He hugged Claire first, tight, firm, emotional, then me. "Thank you," he whispered. "You did this," I said back. "We just stood beside you." Then, as we stood there in the warm afternoon light, I saw Rachel pushing through the crowd. She was storming toward us, face flushed, jaw tight, that same icy confidence I'd grown up resenting, except now it had cracks, the kind that don't heal. She reached us and stopped, eyes locked on Jonah. "You knew?" she said. He nodded. "You still let me sit there like a fool?" "No," he said, voice calm. "You let yourself sit there like that." Her voice rose slightly. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I corrected the story," he said. "That's all. I didn't lie. You did." She turned to me then, nostrils flared. "This is your fault. You'd never liked me. You've always waited for a moment to tear me down." "Rachel," I said, stepping in front of Claire. "It wasn't revenge. Not really. You did this to yourself. We just stopped pretending." "I gave everything for him," she snapped. "No," Jonah said, stepping forward. "Grandma gave everything. You gave speeches. That one landed?" She stood there stunned, frozen in the street as students and families passed by, unaware of the quiet collapse happening just off to the side. She didn't say another word. She turned and walked away. No applause, no crowd, no spotlight, just silence. Later that night, Jonah came over to our place for dinner. Claire lit candles. I grilled. It was simple, peaceful. After dessert, he looked up and said, "You think people can start over?" Claire smiled. "I think people who want to already have." And as we sat there under soft light and quiet laughter, I realized something. The best revenge hadn't been exposing Rachel. It had been freeing ourselves from her completely. In doing that, we gave Jonah the space to find who he truly was. He's not Rachel's son, not her pawn, but his own man. And that was something no lie could ever take away. But just when we thought it was over, something unexpected happened. Something that would shake the family again. One final twist. This time, it wouldn't be Rachel who caused it. It came 3 weeks later, wrapped in a thick, cream-colored envelope with a courthouse seal stamped across the front. It was addressed to both Jonah and my parents, but I received a copy too, as a courtesy from the lawyer Jonah had consulted during the trust investigation. Inside was a formal notice of investigation from the district's civil financial authority. Rachel was being officially charged with misappropriation of minor-held assets, falsification of custodial documents, and willful tax misreporting over a 5-year period. The audit had uncovered a series of creative bookkeeping entries where she diverted Jonah's college fund into a shell LLC, all while claiming on legal forms that she was his guardian.
Oh.
The fund had been drained slowly over years, each transaction small enough to avoid initial scrutiny. Concert tickets, spa visits, consulting fees to herself. Now she owed over $140,000, not including penalties. The consequences were swift. Her accounts were frozen. The silent partner in her real estate deal sued for breach of contract and restitution. She lost her job when the news made its way to the firm's compliance department. Apparently, even the suggestion of financial fraud, especially involving a dependent, was enough to get her walked out with a cardboard box. My parents were stunned. Even my mom, who had quietly held out hope that Rachel would come around, stopped making excuses. She cried the night she found out, not for Rachel. For the years lost, the effort poured into someone who only took Rachel, she called once, blocked numbers, left voicemails, rambling messages about how she was being set up, how the system was punishing her for being a woman who made hard choices, and how you'll all regret this when I'm gone. She was unraveling. But not the theatrical kind of unraveling she used to perform to win sympathy. This was real, lonely, quiet, humbling. When she finally showed up in person, it was at my parents' house. Claire and I weren't there, but Mom told us later. Rachel stood outside the front door for 20 minutes, knocking, then eventually shouting for someone to open up. Mom didn't move. Dad never even got up from the couch. Eventually, Rachel left, and she never came back. Jonah stayed with us for a while after that, just until things settled. We set up the guest room with posters and a new desk, stocked the fridge with his favorite snacks, and let him come and go as he pleased. He started college that fall not far from home, and even joined a mentorship group for students from non-traditional families. One night, as we were clearing dishes, he turned to Claire and said, "You know, if I ever get married, I think I want you to be the one who walks me down the aisle." Claire didn't say anything. She just hugged him. As for me, I stood in the doorway, watching them, the woman who was told she'd never understand family and the boy who was lied to about his, sharing a moment so real and so quiet it made everything else fade. Rachel had spent her life trying to prove she had it all. And in the end, she lost the only people who ever truly loved her, because family isn't defined by biology or image or blood. It's defined by who stays. We did every step of the way.